Worried about bad drivers and what traffic might be like in the Pacific Northwest? Well, we're going to talk about it in this video. I'm guessing the way people drive here in Oregon and Washington is a little bit different than where you're coming from. We'll find out in this video. We'll also talk about traffic and how that affects the day-to-day and where those hot spots are for traffic around the Portland metropolitan area. Stick around, you won't want to miss this one. Hey everyone, welcome back to Living in Oregon. My name is Seth Marchant, licensed broker in the state of Oregon and Washington. Lived here my whole life. I've been driving for a little while, over a couple decades now. So I want to talk to you about what to expect when you're moving here, because the way that people drive and traffic is going to be a little bit different than wherever it is that you're coming from. Now, I've driven mostly west of the Mississippi. I haven't driven too much on the East Coast, so I don't have too much perspective from there. When I think about East Coast driving, I think about skyscrapers and taxi cabs and people yelling and honking at each other, like quintessential, whatever the stigma is in New York. But I don't really know too much about the driving behaviors over there, so feel free to weigh in if you want to comment on this video and let us know how people drive over there. We're going to talk about how people drive in the Pacific Northwest. All right, so first we're going to get into behaviors, and then we'll talk a little bit about traffic, some behaviors that I've noticed over the years. This is a common complaint, and maybe this is the case where you're at, but a lot of people around here do not use their turn signal. I would say people use their turn signal maybe 85% of the time, although it does feel like it's less, because whenever somebody doesn't, you always remember that. We don't remember the times that people do use their turn signals. But I flew over to the Midwest once in Kansas City and got picked up at the airport, and the first thing the person told me was, when you're driving around here, you have to use your turn signal. For sure, you will get a ticket if you do not use your turn signal, which really stuck out to me because I've never met anybody in my life, nor have I ever heard of anybody that's actually gotten a ticket for not using their turn signal. So it's really not much of a thing around here. Next thing is going to be probably a little bit different with drivers here. Drivers here are what I would call competitive. They're not aggressive. They don't drive really fast like maybe you're used to in California, but they are competitive in a way that Oregon drivers and Southwest Washington drivers, Seattle might be a little bit different, don't tend to like to get passed, and they don't drive fast. So it's not uncommon that an Oregon driver would get encountered by a driver behind, driving faster than they are or trying to pass them. And whenever you encounter somebody, if you're a faster driver that commonly encounters other drivers, comes up on them and goes to pass, one thing you'll notice about Oregon drivers is when they see you in the rearview mirror, rather than just getting over, they like to speed up. Sometimes they'll get over and they'll speed up as if to say, hey, I was going fast, trust me. I should have actually been in the passing lane, even though I wasn't passing anybody. You'll notice this a lot driving if you're ever passing somebody or just driving next to somebody and you're slowly coming up to them. People just don't like to get passed in Oregon for whatever reason. So you'll notice that when people will commonly try and match your speed if you're going faster than them, because people just like to drive competitively here. And then that takes me into my next one. There isn't really much of, or at all, really a concept of a passing lane. People like to think of the lanes here that are in the far left, whether it's a 2-lane, 3-lane, or a 4-lane road, people like to think of the far left lane here as the fast lane. So if you're going above the speed limit, a lot of people will automatically defer to that lane. I don't have any video for you guys today. I wish I could have caught this on video, because you see it all the time, but sometimes somebody will merge onto a highway or a road that has 2, 3, 4 lanes, and they'll just go straight to the far left lane, even if there's nobody in the center lane or the right lane. And I've seen this discussion a lot online, like on Facebook, people talking about the driving in Oregon. And I think the reasoning is because people just simply believe that if you're going fast, which is really anything over the speed limit, for a lot of people that's just like 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, that you should automatically be driving in the fast lane, because again, there isn't really this concept of a passing lane. So if there's a concept of a passing lane where you are from, this sort of behavior is probably going to strike you as funny as people just going straight to the left lane, even though they're not passing anybody. And it won't probably take you too long of driving around before you'll see this behavior. Now, this does become problematic, of course, when there is no concept of the passing lane, because it does create congestion and traffic. People will camp out in the left lane And you'll especially see it like on I-5. Sometimes you'll get a train of cars, like 5, 10 cars, all piled up in the left lane with nobody in the center lane. Maybe a car periodically, once every 4 or 5 cars, there might be somebody in the center lane, and you'll just have these trains of cars, bumper to bumper, going over the speed limit, all in the left lane, even though a lot of these cars could get over into the right lane. A part of it too, and I don't blame some people for driving this way, is because you feel like if you get out of that left lane into the right lane, that you're not gonna be able to get back into the left lane because so many people are so close to each other. Like I said, it's like a train of like bumper to bumper. Now, another funny thing with behaviors, despite being sort of passive aggressive or competitive and not really having a concept of a passing lane, you do also see people being overly polite. Oftentimes I'll see somebody stop for somebody else that it's probably not the best idea to, maybe not safe to. A common one would be when you got 2 lanes going each way and you have a car that wants to turn in front of traffic, and the closest lane, you'll have a car that stops to wait for that oncoming car to turn in front of them. But the other lane, those cars can't see because of traffic, and then that car will turn in front of them, and then those 2 cars will collide. I've seen that a fair amount. That's a very dangerous thing to do when you've got 2 lanes, to stop and try and allow somebody else to cross through traffic. But it's just somebody being polite, trying to let somebody in. You do see a fair amount of that around Oregon and Southwest Washington. Now, another funny little thing, there isn't much of a concept, at least it always feels like to me, of zipper merging. Now, I've talked to people about this before. I've heard people maybe that aren't totally familiar with this idea. We've all done it before because construction causes us to do it when there's 2 lanes that go into 1. But there are actually places in Oregon, around the Portland metropolitan area, that specifically go from 1 lane to 2 lanes and then back to 1 lane. These zipper lanes, the purpose for these lanes is to alleviate congestion and delays through intersections. So when you have a bunch of intersections close together, the worst thing that can happen is traffic is so backed up that once your light turns green, there's traffic in front of you and you can't actually go, and you have to sit at a green light. Well, having a extra lane that allows traffic to spread out and allows twice the amount of cars to be stacked up bumper to bumper is a way to alleviate those delays and that type of congestion. We don't have too many places around that like in Portland, but one thing that you will notice about people don't really like to use that zipper lane, and people don't always like to let people that are using the zipper lane in, and that's probably one reason why people don't like to use the zipper lane, because they know that there's a decent chance that that person's not going to let them in. So you will commonly see places that have zipper lanes and times where there's congestion and people should be using the zipper lane, where they don't actually use the zipper lane. And that's again because people just don't like to let you in on those zipper merges. Okay, now let's get into some of the traffic. Oregon has been a migratory state for a long time, at least a couple of decades. They've grown about 20% over the past 2 decades. Going to be similar numbers for Southwest Washington. So we've seen a lot more traffic in recent years. I know when I was a kid driving, it just wasn't common to see a whole lot of traffic and congestion, even during rush hour. But now that's changed. We do have quite a bit more traffic, and I'm going to show you some of that in this drone footage. Also, I'm guessing you might know this or have heard this, but Portland is one of the, if not the most, bike-friendly cities in the entire country. Doesn't necessarily mean that that helps to alleviate a lot of traffic. It might help to alleviate a little bit, but we do still, of course, have a lot of traffic here in the Portland metro area. Now, Portland does employ certain strategies. There are synchronized traffic lights, dedicated bus lanes and carpool lanes, although there's not many of the carpool lanes. Peak hours for rush hour here, if you even want to call it that, it's 7 to 9 a.m. and about 4 to 6 p.m. It's pretty much the same as anywhere else, but you tell me, do you have rush hour now like you used to? Because I feel like actually rush hour, and I'm going to show you some video of downtown Portland, and show you some video going into Portland from Washington on the I-5, which is one of the worst spots in this area. And what you're seeing is around rush hour time. It does feel like we really don't have rush hour like we used to, and probably a lot of that is just work from home. Just not as many people out there traveling to the office as much anymore. Now, like I mentioned, we do have rainy weather, so that is, and like I mentioned, The drivers around here, you would think would be used to driving in the rain, but people do slow down a lot when it rains. So that causes a lot of delays as well. As far as like things like concerts and things like that, we do have the Portland Trail Blazers. They're right downtown Portland, but I will say when there's a Blazers game going on, usually not that much traffic. A lot of people taking the Max to the game, people parking on the other side of the river and walking over the bridge to go to the game. So traffic actually isn't really bad there. I would say as far as events go, the worst traffic in Oregon is when the Oregon Ducks and the Oregon State Beavers both have a home game. They're both south of Portland on the I-5. Corvallis, where the Oregon State Beavers are, about an hour and a half south of Portland. Eugene, where the Ducks are, about 2.5 hours south of Portland. So get a lot of people traveling south on the I-5 for game day. And occasionally both teams will have a home game, and that is some really bad traffic. Also, probably the worst traffic I have seen in my life was just a couple weekends ago on Highway 26 going from Portland to the Oregon coast. On a Saturday morning, I actually happened to be coming back from the coast, so I was going the right way in this case, but we had a heat wave going on. And one of the nice things about Portland, the valley where we live, is that we have a lot of places to escape, both east up the gorge and west towards the coast, where you're typically gonna find that it's about 10, 15, maybe even 20 degrees cooler. So a lot of people escaping up Highway 26, Sunset Highway west towards the Oregon coast. Highway 26, as you'll see from some of the footage, especially around the zoo coming outside of the tunnel, that area is just always congested regardless of the day. Another area that's always going to be congested is 217. If you're on the west side, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Tigard, something like that, decent chance that you're taking 217 to and from to go to places. Feels like 217's been under construction as long as I can remember. Don't ask me what they're currently doing, but there's a lot of construction going on right there. And I know some of you people probably looking at these highways around the Portland metropolitan area and thinking to yourself, wow, 2 lanes? Lots of 2-lane and 3-lane stuff. We don't have the 4 lanes and the 5 lanes like you do in Southern California. We do have I-205, which was created actually for truckers that were going up and down the I-5 from places like Seattle to LA. The 205 was created as a bypass, so you don't get all of these truckers going down 2- and 3-lane roads right through the major metropolitan, the largest, most populous place in the state of Oregon. You have all this congestion, you have truck drivers going through I-5. So 205 was created to alleviate congestion specifically for truck drivers through I-5. Although these days, if you're coming from the north or from the south, taking 205 is usually going to put you right about the same. It's a longer distance, but right about the same time as I-5. So you're still gonna encounter some traffic on 205, specifically around southeast Portland, right around where you hit Division. And that is the reason why you're also gonna have a lot of traffic south where 205 meets I-5, right around Wilsonville. You're consistently going to have congestion there. Once you get past the Willamette River just south of Wilsonville, it almost always alleviates by then. So I hope that helped you get a better idea of how people drive and what the traffic is like around the Portland metropolitan area. I'm going to show you this map right here. This is about midday on a Friday, and this is about what you would expect. All of those red areas are going to be pretty typical. The only thing I would say actually that isn't showing up right now is the I-5 just south of the Oregon-Washington Bridge and just north of the Oregon-Washington Bridge. Up to 500, where you see 500 up there, traffic will get backed up heading south on the Washington side all the way up to about 500. Now, it might look worse than it is. That's just gonna add extra maybe 10 minutes to your drive if you've got bumper to bumper in that section. But that section going from Washington to Oregon on the I-5 can be one of the worst sections of traffic in all the Portland metropolitan area. Again, if you're thinking about moving here, if you have questions about buying a home here, I'm a licensed broker in the state of Oregon and Washington. I invite you to call, text, email. You can find all of our contact information in the description of this video. If you want to hop into our calendar and schedule a Zoom call with us, and if you want to see more videos about what it's like to live in Oregon, we've got all sorts of videos covering pros and cons, neighborhoods, drone driving tours, kind of everything that you could want to get a feel for what an area is like. So make sure and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and give me a thumbs up if this video helped you. Feel free to comment below. Let me know what you think about Oregon drivers. What are some of kind of the funny things, the nuances of Oregon drivers? Or if you're not familiar and you are coming from somewhere else, specifically like the East Coast, tell me a little bit about how people drive where you're from and maybe how it's different than I'm describing in this video. Until next time, take care, everyone.